Hey everybody, welcome back to Men Need to Be Heard. It is Dan, and I'm back with another fantastic show for you today. We're going to be talking about one of the things you guys reach out to me most about, which is family court. And we're going to be diving into some interesting stuff. So one of the things that I often hear from people is, how do we fix it? What can be done? So we're going to address that a little bit. We're going to talk about some of the things that you may not know about on how family court and things like child protective services and all them operate, and maybe, just maybe, come up with a few suggestions on how we can go about fixing it. So let me bring my guest on. He is the one, the only Carl Roberts. Hey Carl, how are you?
Hey, brother Dan, doing well, my brother. How are you?
I am fantastic, and I've set the bar high. Now you got to live up to it.
I'm doing pretty good, but
Well, but you are. I mean, let's be honest. You've been doing this a while. You run an organization, and we'll dive into that. And you've done some amazing work over the years. So I want to really explore a lot of this topic because, as I said, it's something. There isn't a day that goes by I don't get at least a half dozen to a dozen emails about it in some form or another. So I know it's a tough thing for guys to deal with, but also, and I know you'll agree with me on this, a lot of ladies have to deal with it too. So, but before we dive in, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself, whatever personal information you want to share.
yeah, it's the accent's Alabama. Live here in Colorado for about 30 years now, and it's married 10 years, and then spent 10 years in a high conflict divorce and custody battle that just never should have been. Long story short, I grew up in Alabama, kind of idyllic childhood, great family, and learned to play hockey when I was 5 years old, and still play it now that I'm 60 plus years old, and you know, other than this my exposure to this arena, life's been pretty grand.
I know we've talked about it before, but how in the hell do you grow up in Alabama and end up playing hockey is beyond me. I could see if you lived in Colorado as a young man. Absolutely, but Alabama, it just two and two is equal five there, right?
Yeah, well, I grew up in Huntsville, Alabama, where a lot of people don't realize that NASA was founded in Huntsville, Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
And so when my dad was very involved as a senator at the time doing that, so that's another whole story where I kind of get my 15 minutes of fame, or at least a lot of my dad's coattails of that 15 minutes of fame. But, with NASA, brought down the Yankees brought hockey. There we go.
So wait a minute, I did not know this about you. Your father, was he a state senator or U.S. senator or?
Yes, state
Oh,
senator and state rep in the days of George Wallace and all that other fun
oh,
stuff.
okay.
Some really interesting times. But so when again after World War II, we brought over the German scientist Dr. Warner von Braun,
Uh-huh.
the Marshall Space Flight Center had already been established, or the Army Missile Command had already been established in Huntsville for whatever reason. And then long story short, but they ended up bringing Warner von Braun to Huntsville, and so as they grew and built NASA or founded NASA, my dad was a senator at the time, so basically von Braun's liaison to the legislature to pull the resources from the state into Huntsville, Alabama. So.
Wow, that is fascinating. So that's why I like to ask these questions. Tell me a
So
little bit
yeah,
about
so
yourself.
the one story I'd love to
Go
tell
ahead.
is that when Walt Disney had the inaugural run of the monorail in Walt Disney World, he invited Von Braun down, and Von Braun took my dad as his plus one.
Wow.
So,
See? That's why I ask, because I love hearing these stories. And it helps, understand people a little bit better. That's fantastic. So, and it's led you to where you are now, which is, as I said, doing some amazing work. So just kind of let's start by setting the stage. So you run an organization called Colorado Resilience, and I wanted to kind of just dive in right off the bat and say, what inspired you to start the organization? Tell me a little bit about what you do with it, that type of thing.
Yeah. So, like I mentioned earlier, that 10-year high conflict divorce, spent several $100,000 just straight trying to stay in the lives of my two sons. My oldest is 23 and 20, and then the youngest 21 today, and so they were 5 and 7 when this all started. And just like a lot of us, we're naive
Mm-hmm.
to
Yep.
what can become of divorce when there's that animosity or mentality that people go into it. Anyway, so I spent 10 years in that, and then early on, really kind of started. I think I had my first bill that was sponsored in 2015, kind of around shared parenting. It started off as a huge bill, got watered down to basically nothing, and it passed the Senate unanimously, but then failed in the House Judiciary just because those who opposed it didn't hadn't read what it was at the time and came back, again opposed it for the nonsensical reasons that are still out there today. Um, Took a break from that for a little while because it's kind of brain damage,
Sure.
kind of in the lobbying world, and created an app for divorce, which it's just a whole nother story. But just, again, I think it kind of is, next best thing to sliced bread, and when it kind of comes down to it. But but in the last few years, I've really been trying to concentrate on, you really want to have more impact.
Mm-hmm.
And what is so common in this advocacy arena, again, there's a lot of people, as we well know, like to bitch and complain, but at the end of the day, not a whole lot changes. And so I got really tired of, I'm still very tired of doing the same thing and expecting different results.
Yeah.
And so
The
that's
literal
really,
definition of insanity, right?
yeah.
I mean, you've been at it a long time. My audience knows I've been at it for 30 years, and honestly, we're better off. I'm not going to say we're not, but it's not incrementally better off. It's just a little bit, and I'm still saying same things I did in 1995. I'm sure you are too. The fundamental issues that exist with, I'll call it the entire system. Because people talk about family court, they think just the courtroom, or when you're in front of a judge, but there's a whole system behind it that I think a lot of people do not understand. There's a lot of affiliates attached to it. Could be organizations, individuals. There's things like CPS, Child Protective Services. There's guardian ad litems. There's mental health professionals. There's a whole wide range of it, and I have my opinions on what the fundamental problem or driver of all of it is, but I would like you, because I already know the answer, to share with the audience what you think it is.
It's a misnomer to call it a cottage industry, right? It's a $50 billion industry, right?
Yes, it is.
And that really doesn't that it still doesn't encompass the whole picture as we kind of get on out to CPS and everything else. But you know, there's the underlying problem for it all is it is money.
Mm-hmm.
It's the financial incentives for systems. We have systems. It's the dichotomy between us having prevention and treatment.
Right.
We don't have a healthcare system. We got a sick care system. So if we want to have a true healthcare system, we're trying to prevent sickness.
Mm-hmm.
And just kind of, and if we had in this particular arena, if we wanted to truly protect our children and our families from this problem, we would do more at prevention. And so, but yeah, the financial incentives for these systems to grow. So the federal incentives coming from 4D and other federal reimbursements, 4E as well, that go in to help pay for court and child support and child protective services, are all very problematic in making, there's more money in conflict than there is in cooperation and prevention, right?
Exactly.
And then you have the all the professionals. You touched on a few of them, but people naturally think about the lawyers, but it's the judges as well. It's the custody evaluators. It's the guardian ad litem. It's the CASA. CASA. The child advocates and special advocates.
Hmm.
And for kids. I mean, there is just, when you look at people that are all attached to these cases, it's a conflict driven revenue business model.
Yeah, they're incentivized to create rancor between the two parties, right? Get mom and dad pissed off at each other because that's how they're going to maximize the revenue. I was having a conversation actually just this past weekend with someone because they heard me say, that just the lawyers, forget everything else, just divorce attorneys, the revenue stream to them is about $4 billion a year, every single year. And that doesn't come from taxpayer dollars like, say, Title 4D or any of that. That comes directly out of people's pockets, right? There's no reimbursement from the government or any of that with this. It's literally the greatest wealth transfer scheme in the history of mankind. And, a lot of it is driven by emotion. If and you talk to divorce attorneys or you see the bad ones, you know what they're doing because especially if they can get the women upset, because women are more driven by emotional than men are. And that's not, I'm not knocking them. That's just a reality, biological reality. And so they just create this rancor, this need to get them right, to the tune of just the attorneys $4 billion a year. And you think about all the taxes we pay and the tax money going out through things like 4D, 4E, and a host of other programs. The cost to everybody in the country, and we're talking United States primarily, but this applies everywhere else. UK, Australia, you name it, the same thing goes on. And that's a huge problem. And then the other side of it is there's no accountability, right? They can do whatever they want, and no one's going to hold them accountable. And you've talked about that in the past, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, it's I mean, when we it's just a layer of problems. It's just, this, the layers of the onion type thing. But where, and again, I'm just doing my best to kind of, again, sharpen the language and sharpen the message and make it clear and concise. But you know, in family court and CPS, there is where we would think about, we're protected by our constitutional rights, or we're protected by parental rights, which is shouldn't be a controversial term, but it is in these arenas, and that we should have our due process protections, that we're presumed innocent until proven guilty. These are the bedrock of America, as it is probably for the UK and everything else. But again, where judges and CPS and they just have such broad discretion, they can dismiss your rights and your due process protections without consequence, without fear of being held accountable. And that lack of accountability is the nexus of where this all fails. So when we have broad discretion and no accountability, what else are you going to get besides corruption and just complete broken systems?
Yeah, and a host of money available if they do violate your rights and all that. That's, it's all intertwined, right? And the sad part is ultimately it's the children who suffer. They throw out this nebulous term, best interest of the children, which is meaningless. It means whatever.
Most famous non-standard ever.
Yeah, it means whatever what they want it to mean to fit whatever way they're screwing over families. That's essentially
whatever that one person's opinion is on that one given day.
And it could change like that even on the same day. I mean, I've sat in family court and watched judges, having observed them, because I go in with guys sometimes and see, literally within 15 minutes a judge will start switching things around. And sometimes that might be valid. He's listening to the case. All right, well, maybe this is the, all right. But a lot of times it's just bogus stuff because they know there's no accountability. And people don't understand that. One of the things that I have struggled to communicate to people is relaying to them exactly how it works. Well, you could just appeal it. Well, 99.99% of appeals fail. That's the truth. And unless there is a procedural thing when it comes to family court, they're not going to overturn anything. So you can't go in there and go, I don't like his decision. You have to have proof that he violated the law within his decision.
And even there, they're given the courts and their and the appeals courts again will yield to the court's discretion.
Oh, yeah.
And so, well, if the court thought that was right, then they probably, that was within their discretion to decide that the court was right. So, yeah, I mean, just procedural. I mean, it's all semantics. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just a big frigging crapshoot.
It really is. And what another thing people don't realize is even if you win your appeal, they send it back to the same court and the same judge. So guess what? You're going in front of a guy you just got overturned. Good luck with that, friend. I mean,
and the one of the favorite phrases of a judiciary is access to justice, right? Typically, that just means more lawyers. How do we help more access to justice? We have more lawyers. But so there's all these barriers to justice again. So, in theory, the rules of court are really there to the purpose is to protect the best interests of the children and really of families, and to again trying to help keep everybody on that straight and narrow path to get over. I mean, to get to a more happier and prosperous future. Mm. Instead, the reality of it, the court rules is they don't achieve that. They do the exact opposite. That they enable the bad actors. Mm-hmm. And it's all about the money. I mean, so if they go on enable the bad actors, they can, again, I can lie about you, and it's the cost and your ability to overcome that lie is humongous. Mm-hmm. And so and then there's no accountability for me to lie about you. And so I mean, it's a system that enables the bad actors instead of protecting the common good.
And I mean, it is what it is, right? But how do we change it, Carl? I want to dive into that a little bit because I know you're doing a lot of stuff to try and bring about change, both within Colorado where you are, but really these things apply everywhere, not just even in the United States. They can transfer worldwide, and it is a worldwide issue. That people
in the Western world for
sure, and people lose sight of that. One of the things I hear from guys, and I'm sure you do all the time, is my state's the worst or my country's the worst.
Wherever we live, that's the worst one.
One day it's New Zealand, the next it's Australia, the next it's Germany, then the U.S. They're all bad, okay? And I understand the mindset behind it. I'm not knocking anyone, but trust me, they're all bad because they're all basically the same. The system is set up the way it is across Western countries, even some of the so-called Eastern ones or Asian ones, right? They're not that much better. India in particular right now, which is, they're outlawing manhood essentially. I mean, and Australia is right there with them. And when you look at that and realize it's not if, but when it's coming to the States. So how do we bring about change? What are some of the things that you're doing to try and facilitate that?
Well, we know change takes place in two different ways, right? And either through legislation, which is slow and arduous, and it's not easy. Period. And then the other one's through litigation, right? And again, that's just it's rare that litigation works in that space. But one of the things that both of those systems that we don't have in any of it is really the data. Mm. The systems kind of either hoard the data, or they don't collect the data that's really relevant to understanding what the problems are. Or they curate the data so again to make it look like they're doing a good job. And our systems were created for the most part for the good reasons of protecting the common good and protecting children and all this other fun stuff. But the data just does not prove that out. But we cannot collect the data and the systems again don't collect the data about what the parenting outcomes are on the different cases,
Mm.
even just aggregating again. So when we talk again, and then we cannot connect that back to a judge and to show consistent behavior by a judge, even though it may be completely contrary to what's happening in that same district or in other districts. And so we are have started a couple of roadblocks and a couple of things, but we've started creating a data and complaint system. And again, so where people that have their experience with family court or CPS or law enforcement or really whatever system, when the formal complaint systems there are hosted by the system, right?
Right.
And so you can complain to the system, and I'll use an example here of Colorado. In Colorado, you've got the ombudsman's office, which is oversees child protection services, and so and and so you can file your complaints with the ombudsman's office. Rarely ever do those CPS, if they CPO, if they're doing that investigation, again, rarely does the parent or the complainer know what the outcomes are.
Mm.
And most and they and CPS will and CPO will not share with the complainer, even if they investigate and find fault within CPS, they will not share those findings with the complainer. Yeah, I need a better word than complainer, with the complainant,
Right.
and for the not for the purpose of protecting the state and system from accountability and liability. I mean, if they wanted to solve these problems within the system, they would let the bad actors be held accountable, and because money will change things, and
And they're vehemently opposed to that, right? It's you hear it all the time. Like, for example, on CPS data, it's not you can't get it. Even when you're the one being investigated, you try. I mean, I've shared my story many times in the past. I actually had a person that was great from CPS. She got so used to my ex just filing things. We were on a first name basis. She'd show up, Dan, I'm here again. You know, come on in. I won't give her name out because, as far as I know, she's still working for them. Let me make some coffee. Do what you got to do. Ask me whatever you want. We'd sit down at the table and do her thing, and she, because she did a full investigation every time, and even she was admitting she knew what was going on. And I remember saying to her more than once, why don't you hold her accountable? And she says, I wish I could, right? I'm paraphrasing it, but that's essentially what she said. And I said, well, why can't you? Well, my supervisor won't allow it, right? So then I was like, can I get some of the data? No, that's all private. We can't allow that. You got to remember, complaints can be made anonymously, and they're not going to reveal that. We know who, she knew I knew who it was. I know she knew who it was. But she could never say to me, it's your ex-wife doing it, right? And that's the problem, because then, to your point about bad actors, and you're seeing it in I've talked to several divorce attorneys recently and interviewed a few of them. They're all saying the same thing. 70 to 80% of the cases now involve allegations of some sort. They might be CPS level allegations. They might be things like SA and abuse of that thing. When you're talking 70 to 80% of the cases, you're just clogging the system, and unfortunately, the ones that really need attention fall through the cracks. So that's what you're talking about, right? If we can get that data and gather it, now we can go back to, say, a legislator and say, Mr. or Mrs. Legislator, here's what we're seeing. We don't have that ability right now.
so yeah, so I am working on this. I'm a terrible at chasing that next shiny penny, right?
So am
and
I.
not seeing something all the way through to its rightful conclusion. And one of the projects that I'm working on right now, I just interviewed actually a guy this morning to kind of have as an intern to help me kind of collect the data a little bit more. So, but it's again, so I have gotten a lot of data from the public systems on CPS in Colorado for from the first of 22 to the end of 24, collecting the data on the number of calls that are, the number of reports that are made to the hotline, what percentage are screened in versus screened out, and of those that are screened in, which ones kind of then based upon what allegations are within those that are screened in, and then the percentage of calls, the percentage of those that go for assessment, that being screened in, they go for assessment, and then the breakdown of the types of allegations within those assessments, and again, and then what percentage are founded versus unfounded.
Mm-hmm.
And so certainly when we talk about physical abuse, 90%, 88 or 89.9% of those come back as unfounded. And so and we look at that just kind of on that one particular case, and that's I want to say that the physical abuse was, I don't know, like 10% of all the complaints or all the assessments type of thing. But if we look at that particular one, and we look, okay, you and I know that the most of those that are unfounded. Now, absolutely, there are many where the CPS just missed some bad shit that's going on, and then they should have found those as founded.
Mm-hmm.
Just as on the other side of things, that they had some that were unfounded, that were founded that should have been unfounded, just ridiculous to begin with. But if we start, but because CPS has this mentality that we've got to, so they do try to initially in theory, try to screen out what needs to be assessed and what doesn't need to be assessed. But once it kind of falls into that assessed period, now again, what is the cost for not recognizing that most parents in any contested custody type of situation, they have a motivation to lie.
Right.
So of those 90% of calls that came in, or assessments that were done, what percentage were there that were true child safety concerns versus some ill intent to harm the other parent? And again, a lot of those calls also come in from mandatory reporters.
Mm-hmm.
Teachers, police are big ones. And again, because they've been told something and now they've got to report it. So mandatory reporters, again, we can't, there's argument again about mandatory reporters. Again, it shouldn't be legislated that you got to go report something once you've heard something. That mandatory reporters should have some personal responsibility to use their own judgment to file a complaint or not. So we know that mandatory reporters are easily manipulated into making calls, mm-hmm. either by a parent or sometimes just because they've got an issue with that particular parent. So they may want to just kind of
stick it to them. Hey fans, I just wanted to take a quick break from the show to remind you just how much we here at Men Need to Be Heard truly appreciate and value your support. And we'd like to ask you to do us a little favor. It won't cost you a dime, and it'll only take a few seconds out of your day. Could you take a moment to give us that like, give us that thumbs up on the video, and even share it with your friends? Doing so will help us to spread the word and continue to raise awareness on the issues that men and boys face in today's modern world. And we'd love to hear what you have to say on today's topic. So don't forget to comment down below and let us know how we're doing. Your input and feedback means the world to us, and it helps us to continue bringing great guests and even more content each and every week. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss an episode. It's the best way to stay up to date with all of our latest discussions, interviews, and deep dives into the issues men and boys face. It also helps the channel to grow so that we can continue to raise even more awareness on the issues. So hit that subscribe button and become part of the Men Need to Be Heard community. All right, that's it for now. Back to the show. I'm familiar with a case, God, this is 20 odd years ago, but where the mom did a parent-teacher conference and dad wasn't there. And mom knew exactly what she was doing. She was evil, right? And no, it's not me, in case anyone's wondering. It's a friend. But long story short, she knew exactly what she was doing. She said the right words to the teacher, who's a mandated reporter. So the teacher had no choice, because they do not have a choice. They'll lose their licensing. If you're a nurse, you can have that pulled, doctor, you name it, right? They had to report it. And it became a huge investigation. And oh, by the way, they were battling it out in family court at that time, right? And, like to your point about data, I don't know if it's changed since then, but you can't even find out what is the percentage of cases being handled by, say, CPS that are also in family court at the same time. You think we should know that data? You think that might be germane to see if there's a problem? But yet, 20 odd years ago, and I'm out of date, I admit it, that data wasn't available.
And it's not this that particular data is not available today. But and they also kind of look at that. So was there ever a report before this became the separation or this divorce?
Nothing. So,
I mean, how many of these all of a sudden, because we're going through separation and divorce, now we start getting these complaints, right?
Yep.
So in practices, and that's one of the programs I got 4 or 5 other programs that are kind of whiteboarded and ready for somebody to take this forward and do something with it and make it happen. But again, when a call comes in and you put it in, okay, you noted it, it needs to be assessed. We are only looking at the allegation itself, or the claim or the reported concern itself, and not the parents. We should be looking at both parents, mom and dad, or 2 moms, 2 dads, whatever the case may be, with equal vigor and scrutiny.
Great point.
And so not only looking at the claim itself, but also assessing, because we know that the greatest risk to a child in the middle of a contested custody is not sexual or physical abuse, it's the loss of a parent.
Mm-hmm.
And when they lose that, if they're only raised by one parent, or even no parents, they're at greater risk of every societal ill. And so, if we were truly assessing the best interest of the child, we'd be assessing the whole picture.
Mm-hmm.
The whole picture. So, okay, is there motivation? And was this just or was it not? What was the intent behind this report? And so, and we don't have to get people in trouble at that point, but we start to collect the data and put it in that category. So when the second report comes in, and the third report comes in, and the fourth and fifth and 10th report come in, we've got history. And now we can start holding them accountable, because that's just another form. These false allegations are just another form of child abuse and domestic violence.
Absolutely, they are.
And so, but the system, in their victim mentality, or I would say the feminist mentality, again, refuse to assess that a call could be with a ill intent.
Yeah, nefarious means behind it of some sort. It's designed to get an upper hand. There's silver bullets, a term for it. There's a whole bunch of things, but it's the bottom line though is, if this data were available, imagine if you were a judge on the bench, and now CPS is involved, and they're going to give their report to the judge, which more often than not is confidential. You have no idea what's being said, so you have no way to refute it. Right, so there's issues there. They're not going to tell the judge, well, we got 6 different complaints, all within a certain period of time, and blah blah blah. They might know there's complaints. It ties. They think one of the things they always want to say, we don't want to tie judges' hands. Well, that's exactly what you're doing, right? Judges need to be aware of this. What do you mean you got 10 complaints? There's never been a complaint ever. Divorce got filed, we're in family court over custody, and now you've got 10 in 2 months? Something ain't right here, right? But the judges either aren't aware of it, or they are, and we have no idea what they're being told, because it's all protected, and it creates these issues. And then ultimately, it bogs down the system, right? And, we always say, we care about the children the most. We want to do what's right for them. I have yet to hear anyone be able to tell me how this helps children. Have you?
No, I mean, their default answer is we don't want any truth test up front because we don't want to prevent anybody from being able to report abuse, right?
Right.
Should truth be a test? Because if it's false, that is harmful to the child. But again, throwing in that trigger word of feminism, but that they are the ones that are really driving the policy in these systems,
Mm.
and that again, moms, protective moms, need to protect their children from abusive dads. And correct, and absolutely, you and I both know that. I mean, again, moms get screwed in this
Absolute. And
all
that's a
day
key
long,
point,
every day
Carl,
long.
right? It's happening more and more to moms, right? Back when I first got into the 90s, we went through every hoop, and we eventually found out, as best we could, roughly 93% of the time in the state of New York, mom got physical custody. Now it's somewhere around 85%. You might quibble a little bit, but it's somewhere in that number.
And you really can't get that data.
You
I
don't
mean,
know for
the
sure.
data you cannot get it. That's again, it's just
Yeah.
more anecdotal.
You're
Yeah,
extrapolating it from other data and trying to come up with a number. But I do think it's fair to say more dads are actually getting physical custody. Because the word, well,
they were then for sure.
yeah, joint custody is a nebulous term. You can see your kid be given 4 days a month with your kids and have joint custody. It's useless, right? It's physical custody that matters. And so, when you look at that data and try and extrapolate out and figure out the numbers, it's starting to show that more and more dads are getting custody. So the old argument was, well, like you said, we have to make sure that moms and their children are protected from abusive fathers. Never mind the fact that mothers commit more abuse by a mile than fathers do, followed by the way the guy mom brings in next, right? Set all that aside, but don't if we're going to go by the assumption that it's one gender that's the problem, one, it turns our entire constitution, over. But how, again, it goes back to how are we justifying this as a means to protect our children? Because you put this on dad, you make the accusation against dad, and more often than not, judges will make an ex parte order. For those that don't know, that means that they issue an order and you have no idea it was issued until the sheriff shows up and serves it on you, right? You have no means of defense. And
Ex
that can,
parte protective order. Yep.
yeah, it can take months for those to get resolved. Because their argument was, well, dad can fight it and all that. Yeah, he can. It might be 9 months down the road. That's 9 months of your
Meanwhile,
child.
the lawyer's getting paid all along the way.
Thousands, right? But meanwhile, the child and the parent, the dad, have lost 9 months of time together. Roughly speaking, you have 18 years with your child, right? That's a pretty significant amount of time. And they're trying to remedy some of this time, taking back bills and all that. But as it stands right now in most states, you're never getting that time back. And that hurts children, to your point, right? Ultimately, we are hurting children. And yet they don't want to fix it. They don't even want to know there's data out there, and they don't want to allow there to be data, which is where your program comes in, correct?
Yeah, and I've mentioned before. I mean, there's three groups that are, adamantly opposed to reconcile or solving these systems. One are the systems themselves, whether it's judicial or the bureaucracies that thrive on this conflict. You got all the professionals and the lengthy list of who they are that thrive on this conflict-driven profit revenue model, business model. Excuse me. But then what I've often referred to as these policy villains, and these are more oftentimes the mothers' rights groups,
Mm-hmm.
and these moms groups, and moms fight back, and one mom's battle, and and several groups that are again promoting this false narrative: men are dangerous, women are protective.
Mm-hmm.
And that, so all that means they're all serving this power control dynamic, the money power and control dynamic to keep things as they are. And but yeah, I mean, so the more that we know the data, you mean data is the most powerful weapon these days, right?
Yeah.
And it's what facilitates solution. So that's what we're trying to do. With certainly trying to start to collect more data, first anecdotally from the individuals, and then hopefully as we kind of get more credibility and authority, pulling some of that data and correlating that back with the systems themselves, and then hopefully being able to mandate more data being collected within the systems, so we can get a more complete and accurate picture of it all. But yeah, it's there is it's just not what we were brought up to believe, right? The systems don't work like we were taught to believe.
Yeah, that's the
You know?
second. First scam is, well, the second biggest scam in the world is that I think Reagan said it. The government's here, and we're here to help you. I'm
Yeah.
paraphrasing it, but so I want to just kind of delve in so the audience can understand it better. The program DCCS, if I'm saying that right, say that three times fast. Let me put the teeth back in.
Data
Um,
collection and complaint system. But because we talked about this before, I'm going to shorten that to just I'm going to change it to case and complaint system.
okay, so how? Give me a flavor for how this would work. Like, if let's say you get the system built, how would someone use it? And I'm gonna by someone I mean anyone. It could be a legislator to a CPS person to us, you and me, right? How can they use it, and how can we then, through the reporting you're going to have in it and all that, how can we then drive change by using it? Obviously, data is the key point, but how would we use that data? I guess is what I'm asking.
So I think more, everything's kind of on this continuum of sorts. Again, so most of us are well involved within the systems long before we ever even think about filing a complaint or we know we got a problem. So from that perspective, we're creating kind of a case system, kind of a case journaling, a way to document and collect your documents in an organized fashion, be able to and create these timelines of events. And part of that is also being able to identify the actors that are involved at the different pieces of it across systems, whether it's a lawyer or the CPS case manager, back over to the child support technician or whatnot. But again, so across systems, which are often siloed right now, which is part of the problem. So across systems and being able to kind of tag them along. So again, helping people kind of work through their cases, document their cases, organize their cases from that perspective. But as we get to the complaint system, again, starting to collect the data and being able to aggregate the data from one perspective, just so we can kind of see the raw numbers.
Mm-hmm.
So by aggregating the data and the complaints, we can quickly see if we got 10 complaints around this one particular judge.
Mm-hmm.
And as we kind of can bring those 10 litigants together, and we kind of see some common practice by this particular judge, now it gives us more weight from a change perspective, either A, legislatively, or B, where maybe it needs to come more often or than not, is litigation. So as you have more complaints kind of compiled and coming together as a class action per se,
Mm-hmm.
it gets more legal weight and more weight for people to be able to hear what you're saying and to make changes, and more of an urgency around that. So that's just kind of on the complaint system side of things. But as you get more and more of the data across the systems on these different aspects that we deal with every day, around false allegations, around the misuse of the abuse of power, or again just the broad discretion, and and translate that into the numerical numbers that are really harming our kids and harming our society. Legislators, I mean, I do think that most legislators want the right thing, right? Just
Mm-hmm.
as most judges want the right thing. Most CPS case managers want the right thing. But sometimes it takes more than just want we got to have the data to make it more clear and concise about bad actors, bad policies, and bad practices that continue to victimize or harm parents and children.
And that's, the key point with all that, Carl, is, coming back to data is a good thing, right? It enables us to do a good assessment on not just individuals, but the system as a whole, right? So I know you meet with legislators all the time. I do. There's a host of us that do. And one of the things that they will always ask us, well, how do you know, right? In some form or another. Well, you're telling me this. How do I know it's true, right? And they'll couch it different ways. And I'm like, well, you're right. We don't know for sure because there is no data because you don't give us any funding to be able to do that. And you would think they would go, oh, well, that's something we need to address. I can count on one hand the number of legislators that have been willing to even consider it, right? What are you finding? Like, have you brought this forth to, say, various legislators or anyone for that matter, and tried to get these solutions adopted? What's been your experience? What's holding it up? That type of thing.
Not this particular one. I really haven't moved it. The data well, I'll go by the old name of the data complaint election.
Say that three. See, you can't even say it.
Yeah, see, well, again, kind of changed the name again based upon some of our last conversation. But I haven't really brought that one forward because I really kind of thought we'd be a lot further along right now than we are. And again, being able to have a little bit more proof in the pudding, to be able to kind of to talk with more authority and clarity about the value of it. This a conversation we've had before, but again, so there's this old parable in child welfare, right, where you have a couple walking down by the river and they all of a sudden start to see these babies floating by, and one runs into the water to go start pulling out babies, and the other one starts to run upstream. The first one says, "Where you going?" Says, "I'm going upstream to try to stop throwing see what's throwing these babies in the water. Stop it." That is the hypocrisy of our systems. That is the basis of our government in these government systems, because they want to talk about prevention, but they're all about treatment. If you didn't have the need for treatment, you wouldn't have the need for systems. So the more we prevent, the fewer customers we have to treat. And that's where the financial incentives are, the federal incentives are in these systems, is to grow these systems based upon the number of customers we're serving.
Right.
Or abusing. And so, but if we, so what part, the logic about these systems and these, I've got 3 or 4 other programs that I kind of, again, whiteboarded, and I got kind of some construct to. But again, if we invested, for every dollar we invested up front, we could probably save $25 to $50 on the back end.
If not more.
It's not more, just from all the other ills that kind of come down. And it's not just within the system itself, the family court, and kind of cut, slashing their dockets by half, or child protective services slashing their caseload by half. But it's more as we kind of come into the justice system, and jail, and mental health, and healthcare, and I mean all these other systems, and poverty. Housing, homelessness.
Yeah, it's all intertwined. Yeah,
it's all intertwined. And the more that, again, what a lot of people don't understand is that the policies around child support is about pushing parents apart. And right now, where we have such a problem with homelessness, we ought to be encouraging. They don't gotta like each other, but if they need to, allow them to live together so they can both provide for their child. Meanwhile, helps kind of minimize some of that homelessness problem as well.
Yeah, it would cut across everything, right?
It cuts across everything.
And that's the problem, because the fix is by adopting a mindset of early intervention, right? Let's try and head these problems off before they become problems. But instead, we're, like you said, we're waiting until the babies are coming down the river before, and then there's 10,000 of them, where they're only putting one in at a time, and if we could stop a few of those ones from going in the river, put a significantly bigger dent in the problem. But they're not. A lot of them aren't open to it. One of the things that I find talking with legislators, they're all lawyers for the most part. There's exceptions, but if you go and look at any particular state's legislator, the majority of them will be lawyers. They're beholden to the Bar Association. And as I said, divorce attorneys alone are making $4 billion a year. And when we say the costs, it's not just to the taxpayers or anyone else. It's money taken directly out of your pocket, my pocket, and handed to attorneys. And, that's why we need to be driving this. And look, divorce is a fact of life. It's going to happen. We're not going to put the genie back in the bottle on that, right? No fault. I will be shocked if it ever gets reversed. But yet, when they started implementing it in the 70s, and by the way, it was the Republican Party, specifically Ronald Reagan, who signed it into law the first time. This is where this all started, right? And now we're at the point where ballpark 55% of all marriages end in divorce, which means you are in family court or divorce court, one or the other, usually both, and you're battling it out. And that takes money out of your pocket. I mean, you said you spent six figures. I spent six figures. That's money that could have paid for a child's education. That's money that could be used, God forbid, for a health issue of some sort. It could be used, let's say your child's struggling. You need to hire a tutor. Well, nope, can't do that because I got to pay the attorney and all that. That's what we're talking about, right? And that's where having a system that collects this data and enables us to go to legislators and say, here's what's really going on. What are you going to do about it? I think would be a significant improvement to where we are now. And, not to shift too much on the focus, but one of the things that I'm always dealing with people, especially right now, is this belief that one party politically is better than the other with these issues. And, to your point about what you're trying to do and all that, I want to kind of have that discussion with you. My opinion is they both suck. What's your thoughts on all that?
Well, we'll say that of the states that have made minor steps towards, solving family court per se, have all been red states. By and large, have been red states.
That's a fair point, but that's also the same states that are putting in child support at conception with no safeguards.
Yeah, I mean, but they're not putting them in. But again, you got these idiots talking about it.
Yeah, well, yeah, they're pushing hard for it, and yet when you read most of the bills, not all of them, there are some exceptions. There's no safeguards for the man. So what happens if he's not the dad?
I mean, yeah, so this is a bipartisan issue.
Yep.
A bipartisan problem. But when we think about, so speaking of for Colorado, we're a very blue state. We have Democratic governor, Democratic House and Senate, almost to a supermajority. And so one of the toxic issues here are parental rights. When we kind of think about parental rights, I mean, it's just one of those words or phrases that have been made negative.
Mm-hmm.
That whether it's the woke culture or whatever you want to call it, it's a toxic thing. So the Republicans have tried to pass a parental rights bill here every legislature for the last 10 years or so to no avail. It never gets out of committee. But when we talk to talk to individual legislators about some of these individual problems, and that's just one more clarification. So parental rights, I've always kind of seen it as a different lane than this family court lane, right? And when I think about parental rights historically, it's more about education and the vaccinations and the healthcare and being the ability to upraise your own child.
Mm-hmm.
Where family court and CPS.
Mm-hmm.
And so, although those are tightly intertwined on the public sphere, not necessarily. It's certainly not in the legislative sphere. And so, but it is, the more that we kind of, so I've got a Democratic legislator, representative who has agreed to pick up to prime sponsor two bills for me. One is Garza's time taken, time back, and the other one's the three strikes law.
Mm-hmm.
And she has a son that's been through the drill, and she's had a hard time being able to see her grandchildren and all this other stuff. And so she is she will be bucking the trend of the Democratic Party here in Colorado. And I won't have a problem getting Republican sponsors for these bills, but there are more that I want to do, and none of them, unless I got a broader swath of Democrats that will get on board. Again, they've been preconditioned that parental rights are wrong, and that that another part of the Democratic ideology is that children are first and foremost a ward of the state or a responsibility of the state, and second, your responsibility as a parent.
Right.
And I gotta find a more eloquent way to say that. But again, the Democrats aren't thinking about that as a negative perspective. Again, there's been more this system's a good thing. Government's good. It's the safety net, whatever. Or social systems. We need social systems, but we've got to protect the parental rights, our constitutional rights, and due process.
And that's the key point of the whole thing, right, Carl? Is I don't necessarily disagree with the premise that they need to protect people, right? I mean, ultimately, they need to be the safety net. I agree with that. But they're crossing over the line. And my argument has long been it's both parties. There's good in both parties, by the way, and there's bad. I go back to New York. We had a lot of Democrats that were in favor of shared parenting. More than we did Republicans. Of course, in New York, it was a supermajority 20-odd years ago. So, far more. So, it's both a pro and a con when we talk about these issues politically. The problem is this needs to be taken out of politics because, when you look at whether it's a blue state, a red state, a purple state, I did a video a couple of weeks ago where I talked about this, specifically with regard to child support. And I used Texas, extreme red state now. I used New York, blue state, and I used North Carolina, where I am, which is purplish right now, pinkish, purplish, whatever color you want to use. We have a Democratic governor. We had a supermajority Republican in the legislature. They've lost that. We're kind of in the middle, and it really depends on who you talk to and where you're at and all that. It's just like every other state. But when you look at all three states, the same issues exist in all three of them. And the lack of awareness and willingness to fix them is the same in all of them. And that's what I mean when I talk about I hate both parties, because they talk the talk, but they never walk the walk. And they love to say, well, we got to protect the children, and yet everything they're doing is harming the children, And that's where I think a lot of what you're doing and what you're talking about and the platforms that you're trying to put into place could have a significant change. Because if we have solid data to go to them with that they can't refute, now we can back them into a corner. If we go to them, I don't know how it is in Colorado, but New York, family court judges were elected. They got 10-year terms. So you get a bad judge, they're on the bench for 10 years, and you might not ever know that they're bad because there's no data. And we had one in particular. We knew this person was bad. And we started gathering the evidence, and it was overwhelming. There was no doubt this guy hated men. I mean, he was like 99% awarding physical custody to moms. I mean, come on, right? But we didn't have any of that. And then when I would meet with legislators, they're like, well, there's no data. And I would say to them, well, help me get it. Give us some funding, or, put something in place. But yet they fought it. And I think that's some of what you're dealing with, right? To your point you made a little while ago, I think genuinely most legislators want to do right. I agree with you completely. Most judges do too. There are exceptions, but most of them do. Same thing with CPS workers. God help. I've talked about it many times.
That's the last job I want, right?
That is the first job I would never want is to be a family court judge, because there is no winning there. Whatever decision you make, it's wrong. Bottom line, right? You're gonna hurt somebody. Same thing with CPS. I have friends who have worked in CPS for decades. God bless them. They see the worst of the worst. You and I can't even fathom what they've seen, because I've heard some of the stories, right? And yet they do what they do. And I genuinely believe most of them want to do right. But even their hands are tied. and yet we can't get change brought in. How do you ultimately think we start getting this change? Because frankly, if we don't, society as we know it is going to end, and we're already seeing the cracks in the foundation across the country.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's there's no polite words for it, right? And there is and people, you look at the different states where they have made minor progress. I mean, so again, when you look at how that's happening, you a lot of times it just comes down to one or two, and then hopefully spreading out to a handful of advocates that have made this their mission.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, those of us in this space, on this side of the coin, it's just harder for us to kind of get on the same page with one another,
Right.
and kind
Yeah.
of all go together down this.
It's like herding feral cats. It really is.
I mean, it's just nuts, and but the opposition just well organized, and right the opposition, these mom groups are saying, we're victims, protect us, and so they're heard where we're not necessarily heard, or we're given less attention, and it is there's no simple, you and I both know plenty of people who are just trying their damnedest in these different states to bring about change. And there's no simple equation. No, it all takes blood, sweat, and tears. But you got to organize with other folks, and you got to go beyond your own little uh, echo chamber and be willing to put yourself out there. And at the end of the day, it's not about your story whatsoever. It is about systemic change and the systemic need. And what our systems said it in two or three different ways, but what our systems fail to do is reinforce those guardrails to kind of keep everybody on the higher road to the brighter and more prosperous future.
Hmm.
They're too busy greasing the skids to send you on down to that low road, and that's because that's where the money is. And and if we just kind of reinforce or narrow the discretion of judges and CPS caseworkers and everybody else involved to providing scrutiny on both parents, enforcing constitutional rights, ensuring due process protections. Those are the guardrails to kind of keep everybody on that higher road. And then where those where that discretion is broad and no accountability, that's what's greasing the skids to send you on down that low road. And that's where, all these state budgets are under this pressure, right?
Hmm.
Colorado's running $1.2 billion in the deficit, and but if they did the right thing here on court and on family court and on CPS, God, they could reduce those budgets by tens of millions each.
Tens, if not hundreds of millions of
Tens of,
dollars.
if not hundreds of millions. I mean,
Yeah.
because some of the programs that again, drinking my own Kool-Aid, if you just kind of did some of this early intervention program that I've got proposed, that kind of in family court, got custody hearings, motions by more than half, and and just reduce, and resolve most all of them within 30 days or less. I
Which
mean, what does that do to the court's docket and to their budget? And and it serves their purpose.
Well, I mean,
But
forget them even. Let's talk about the litigants, right? So
yeah,
you think you've been through it, I've been through it, so we know what it's like. But for those that maybe haven't been through it and that are listening, you cannot possibly fathom the amount of stress. And when I say stress, it's physical, it's mental, it's emotional, it's financial, it's every level that you're dealing with when you're in we say family court, divorce court, whatever way you want to phrase it. When you're dealing with that, it's relentless, and it goes on and on and on. Motions go back and forth. Yeah, I eventually became immune to it because I was in family court like every 6 weeks for 12 years. I became completely immune to it. But I see what it does to people. And you and I talk about how it affects men because, hello, we're men. We've been through it from that perspective. But the truth is, it affects moms every bit as much, right? And so, if we could, to your point, cut this down to 30 days and get 90% of the issues out of the way and focus on the 10 that maybe we need to focus on, which in many cases you wouldn't even need to do that. Think about how that saves money for the families, saves stress, will reduce the effect on people's health, right? All across the board. That's
Protects the best interest of the children.
of all the nothing else. That's the one reason we should be doing it, right? Because, oh, by the way, we talked about the stress on mom and dad. If you think it doesn't affect the kids, you're a fool, right? And that's ultimately, I think, really what's driving you, driving me, and all of us. And it's going to take a village. We need an army to bring about change. We are, like my partner Lindsay on our Boy Meets Squirrels talks about, is like we've got our finger in a dike, but, the hole isn't big enough for a finger. It's a mile wide, and we're trying to hold back that tide. And it's impossible right now because there's not enough of us to stand up and fight. And, that's why groups like yours with Colorado Resilience, trying to build those coalitions. So yes, you're in Colorado and your organization is, but what the work you do helps those of us, say, in North Carolina or New York or.
I mean, the programs I'm trying to bring forward are independent of whatever state.
Exactly right.
I mean, I've got a program that, again, what I'm talking about in family court. I've got a lady down in Texas. We're trying to talk about how she can, again, she has a better temperament than I do of dealing with judges, and so she hopefully get more traction there. But again, all it would take is one family court judge, regardless of the state, to pilot this. And my T's aren't dotted, my T's aren't crossed, my I's aren't dotted, but there's a great starting point here to figure this out. And it just takes that one brave judge. I mean, here in Colorado, and I assume in different states, you get these specialty courts for, drug addicts or homelessness or veterans and stuff like so. And I forget what they call it here, but again, it is within the court's discretion and ability and authority to have a separate court for family court and to manage it with different rules. But it just takes the courage of one judge to try it out. I mean, I guarantee if they started working on this and embraced this project or and piloted this program, in a year they would show such immense value to the public and to the taxpayer and to themselves. It would cross the country like wildfire. And I got two different programs in Child Protective Services. One to ensure that with family advocates to ensure that the rights and due processes are all protected for whoever has interaction with CPS, and then another one to kind of assess both parents. Mm-hmm. And again, those two programs alone would solve so much up front. And then we hadn't talked about child support except saying, of all the systems that were created for, child welfare, created for the right reasons, and we need it because there are bad parents out there, bad people that want to cause children harm. But child support, created for all the wrong reasons, and it is one of those programs that should absolutely be disbanded and defunded and collapsed and closed. But anyway, that's a whole.
That's a whole other show right there. So we're starting to run out of time. So Carl, I have two more questions for you. The first one was, as someone who's an older gentleman, how's that? Because we're about the same age. I can say that to you.
I think we are the same age.
We are the same age. So, I look at it as my time on this earth is limited. I may have 10, 15, 20 years, hopefully, right? I know what I'm trying to do to drive change. What I'd like to know from you is over the next, let's say 5 to 10 years, just to narrow it down a bit, what do you see and what do you want to do within Colorado Resilience or all the other things that you're working on? Where do you see would be the ultimate success for you? And, understanding that you work with a lot of people. So, and trying to help them. What would that ultimate success look like for you?
Again, there's just so much of it just feels like bull in the ocean, right? But again, it's starting to instill accountability into the system, whether it's with judges, CPS, lawyers, evaluators, gals, just starting to instill accountability into the system, starting to narrow their discretion and hold them accountable, not just for mistakes, but for behaviors and practices that harm. And, again, maybe that's a pipe dream or whatnot, but that's where change starts to take place from both a legislation and litigation standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes data to drive both of those. So,
I couldn't agree more with you. I'm not saying that because you're sitting on the screen in front of me right now. It's, if we can, accountability is the number one thing. If we can get people accountable, and by the way, accountability can be a positive too, right? If we see a judge or a gal or gal's guardian ad litem for those who don't know, or a CPS worker who's doing phenomenal work, let's recognize that and say, okay, what are they doing that we can implement otherwise? So it doesn't have to be negative. Accountability can be positive as well. So, I mean, you're doing amazing work, Carl, and you know, I applaud you for everything you do. You and I are both pretty much in the same boat. This is all, the family court stuff's all behind us. We're doing this to help our children, our children's children, and our children's children. I mean, I know that's one of the drivers for you. It certainly is for me. And hopefully we can bring about change. So, how can people help you in your endeavors? How can they follow you on social media? How can they contact you? How can they see what Colorado Resilience is doing? Give us all that information.
yeah, first and foremost, go to coloradoresilience.org. Subscribe to our newsletter, that sort of fun thing, and then which they need to come out a little bit more regularly. But one of the things that again, where I've been kind of proud and of what I brought to the table or tried to bring to the table is, again, instead of just beating the dead horse about what the problems are, is really kind of focusing on what solutions can be. You'll see there's an activist tab in our menu, and at the bottom of that it's called Core Solution Stack, or Colorado Resilience Solution Stack. And just learn a little bit more about what we're trying to do. I like to say trying to do instead of what we're doing, because that's mainly what we're doing is trying.
Mm-hmm.
And so, see if one of those programs kind of resonate with you, and if it does, contact me through the website and let me know. And I'm looking for others to help. It's not only just we got 4 or 5 legislative bills that we're trying to push this next session, but again, in for people trying to chase legislation, both there's Robert Garza and Mark Ludwig, they should be following and listening to and trying to follow their lead. But again, there's programs within the family court. There's programs within child support. There's programs within child protective services that can have immense impact if we can get them piloted and trialed and the ability to prove their proof. So, for those that want to know more, that want to help try to bring it to their state, I'm all ears. I'd love to talk.
Yeah, the more we coordinate and work together, the sooner we can bring about change. And I'll put links down below to everything. So you'll be able to just go down into the show notes, click it, and it'll take you right there. There's some really good data on that website. I've looked at it several times. So, Carl, we do have to wrap things up. I want to give you the opportunity. Any final thought that you would like to share with the audience?
Yeah, it's just, we're dealing in a day and age of, we talk about the all this division and all the vitriol, and you're getting sidetracked with all that. Again, when we start to talk this of mom's rights or dad's rights, again, that's not the point. Again, it's an equal opportunity place to get screwed. It doesn't matter, if more moms do or more dads do in this particular arena. It's an equal opportunity. And so we need to quit looking at it from the gender perspective, even though I certainly contribute to that my fair amount. But it is, but and to recognize that this is systemic, that it's an equal opportunity. That we got to work together. We got to hold people, our legislators, our courts, our service providers accountable in these systems. So God bless everybody and do your best to move the ball forward.
Carl, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your thoughts. And I really encourage people to go follow Colorado Resilience, talk to Carl, see how you can help out, see what he's doing, and maybe implement it in your state or your country, because it can make a tremendous difference. So thank you, Carl, for taking time out of your busy day to come on the show and talk about it.
Dan, thanks for hosting me. Really appreciate all the work that you're doing. I mean, again, just trying to bring out some of these the gender aspects of this that aren't necessarily the narratives that aren't so popular that need to be heard. So thank you for all the work that you do, brother.
Well, I appreciate that. All right, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up. And again, thanks to Carl for joining me today and for the incredible work he and his team are doing. And if one thing is obvious, it's clear that we need to get more people not only speaking out about the problems, but stepping up and taking action, offering your own solutions. If you think our solutions aren't good, fine, come up with your own. I'm all ears. I know Carl is. And the more of us that get involved and the more of us that take action, the sooner things will change. As I said, stepping up can start by just going over to, say, Colorado Resilience's website and seeing what they're doing and seeing how you can do it or going to my website and seeing the work I'm doing and just piggybacking off of it. Steal anything I'm doing. I don't care. I'm happy with it, right? And as always, to all of you, I truly appreciate you for tuning in, and I hope that you got some value from today's episode. And if you do or did, please do me a favor and help by sharing this with a friend. Go down in the comments. Let us know what you think. I know Carl's going to read them. I certainly do. Let us know what you liked, what we said, what we didn't like. Maybe solutions that we didn't offer, or other areas maybe that we're not paying attention to that need to be addressed. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel and helps me to do what my goal is, which is to help spread the word and raise awareness on the issues that men and boys face in today's society. Again, thank you so much for watching. And we'll see you next time on Men Need to Be Heard.